I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And here we are at the end of award season. We've been covering this stuff since October, all the different premiations, and now my Oscar predictions are going to be happening this Thursday. I may push it to next Friday, but Thursday during the middle of the day, I will release my full predictions video in all the 23 categories, but I didn't want to miss a video because, of course, we do weekly videos at the very minimum every Monday. We're going to have one, of course, next Monday as well after the Oscars in terms of the award show, and then we're going to go into a brand new series where I actually am going to rank all of the best actress winners in a decade, all the best actor winners in a decade, picture winners. That will be a lot of fun. So the best acting winners for the actress category or the supporting actress category in the 2010s and then the 2000s and 90s, and sort of go back. Same thing with best picture too. We're going to be doing that all throughout the summer up until, and of course, next year's Oscar season. But let's not talk about next year's Oscar season just yet. We're in it right now, and just this video I wanted to make a little bit of a short video to not miss that sort of weekly Monday upload, just to give you 3 categories that I think will surprise at the Oscars. I'm not 100% guaranteed that these are going to be my final predictions, but they probably are going to be my final predictions, and I'm essentially talking to you about 3 movies that are in either number 2 or number 3 slots on Gold Derby or on betting sites that I think you should at least consider. You may ultimately go with something else, but I want you to be aware of these potential upsets so that when you see them on Oscar night, you're not surprised, or you may even consider reconsidering one of these categories and picking one of my own or picking another movie. Just 3 categories I think are sort of vulnerable that will surprise on Oscar night. And that first category is Best Score. I think Best Score is a category that for a lot of people they just initially thought of as, okay, it's going to be Babylon, it won early on in the Globes, and then that's going to continue on. But I think actually this category requires a lot of analysis, and the more you look into it, at least the way I look into it, the more you feel confident that All Quiet on the Western Front will actually win. There's a lot of reasons going for it. First off, I think is that Babylon is just a weak frontrunner. It is the frontrunner on Gold Derby and on betting odds, but really it hasn't done much. It won at the Golden Globes, but Justin Hurwitz is really well liked at the Golden Globes. He won for his First Man score, even though First Man wasn't even nominated at the Oscars, so there's a little bit of a disparity there. And Babylon lost at Critics' Choice. Babylon lost at BAFTA, nominated in both places, and lost. Tar won at Critics' Choice, which wasn't eligible for the Oscars, so we don't have to worry about that. And then the other winner was BAFTA's All Quiet on the Western Front, and I think a lot of people can sort of excuse that win and go, well, yeah, of course, All Quiet on the Western Front won. It won a bunch of BAFTAs. The Brits really liked it. It was the most nominated movie there, yada yada. So it's going to go to an American-type movie with Babylon. But I think that's sort of a weak argument because Justin Hurwitz is so well liked at the Globes and because BAFTA actually has real members to it. So Babylon, I think, is a weak contender, and I think All Quiet is actually a quite strong contender because of, first of all, that BAFTA win. I think that the Oscars, we know, have become more international over the past years, growing their membership base. So what does that mean? The international award shows like the BAFTAs are going to become more indicative and have been very much more indicative over the past few years rather than even SAG or Critics' Choice. They've been more accurate because naturally it's an international group there and the Academy has grown internationally, so that influence has dominated, or at least has started to creep into the Oscars. So I think that's probably a stronger side than the Golden Globes, which is a small group of people, none of which are members of the Academy, so strong sign there. Also, if you want to look at the historical accuracy between BAFTA and the Globes, BAFTA gets it right more often than the Globes in this category, and that's also considering the fact that if you look at the BAFTAs, it's actually the best original music category, so that means in years past, like 2018, A Star Is Born will get a surprise win. So even though the category is not super exactly right, it still sort of is very indicative of predicting the Oscars in terms of the overlap between the BAFTAs and the Oscars rather than the Globes and the Oscars for this category. Another point for me is just that All Quiet on the Western Front won 7 BAFTAs. That's a huge deal. And one best film, there's a huge amount of support for that film. Well, that's going to show up somewhere at the Oscars, right? I think a lot of people think international feature, think cinematography as well, but I think it's going to show up at least one other category, whether that be adapted screenplay or here in score, I think it's going to show up somewhere just because there's a huge amount of support for that film. It's going to show up somewhere at the Oscars. It won 7 BAFTAs. Is it really only going to win 2 at the Oscars? I don't think so. I think it's going to be a surprise, and this is an easy category to get one here. And also, if you look at the category historically, if you look at the past 10 years, 7 out of the last 10 winners were first-time winners. I think that's a really interesting stat because it indicates to us that while this guild and this branch usually likes to appreciate nominating the same people over and over again, you know, John Williams and Hans Zimmer and sometimes Alexander Desplat, these guys get nominated all the time, but they don't win too often. If you look at someone like Hans Zimmer, he's won twice in the last 30 years, and his second Oscar was just last year. So they like to nominate a lot of the same people, but they don't like to give the reward to the same people over and over again. That's why 7 out of the last 10 winners have gone to one-off kind of composers like Michael Dana and Stephen Price, and certain people that don't get nominated every year but had a really great score, Hildur Guðnadóttir, for Joker even, you would say. So that's not really a sign pointing towards someone like a Justin Hurwitz, who already has an Oscar, 2 as a matter of fact. Do they really want to give him another one for a movie that's not nominated for Best Picture, where All Quiet on the Western Front is a new person, is a Best Picture nominee, did have that strength in the international branch, and of course already won Best Score at the Oscars. It's a very noticeable score too, a bold kind of a choice within sort of a modern electronic style, within the, of course, the 1910s World War I story. It's an interesting kind of a noticeable choice, so I think people will notice the score and appreciate that there. I just think Babylon's sort of a weak contender, and I could even say someone like The Fabelmans. If people really like The Fabelmans and they don't want to put it in screenplay or picture or director, they may just put their support there for John Williams, and maybe he wins there. I could see a big surprise there. I think this category is really open to surprise, and I think All Quiet on the Western Front has a good shot to win for Best Score. Best Editing, I'm going to go with Top Gun Maverick as my potential upset and surprise in this category. It's second place on Gold Derby, it's second place on betting odds, with pretty poor odds at this point. I think a lot of people, rightfully so, have been identifying Everything Everywhere All at Once as a frontrunner. Why? Well, because it's won everything. It won Critics' Choice, it won BAFTA. That's a really great sign that it winning both of those is a strong sign of it winning for Best Editing. But I do think that this category is much more up in the air and vulnerable to a potential surprise than a lot of people. I think a lot of people just saw those 2 wins and went, okay, I guess it's going to be Everything Everywhere All at Once, mark that down, don't need to worry about it. But we see these surprises every year, particularly in the technical categories. So I actually think we have to be a little bit more careful in terms of looking at these precursors, because when you look at a category like Best Production Design, we have the Art Directors Guild and of course Critics' Choice and BAFTAs. We can pretty much tell if one movie like Babylon wins all of them, they're probably going to win Production Design at the Oscars. But certain categories like documentary, I also think like editing, aren't super indicative of what's ultimately going to win. Why? Well, look at the history. If you look at the past 10 years for the Critics' Choice Awards, they have gotten the Best Editing winner right with the Oscars 3 out of the last 10 winners. And 2 of those 3 were actually ties. So they were allowed to actually pick 2 movies, and then ended up one of them, of course, winning at the Oscars. So if you take away those 2, 1 out of the last 10 years, they got it completely right. The opposite is that 9 out of 10, of course, they get it wrong. So it's an incredibly inaccurate category. If anything, if it wins a Critics' Choice, it indicates to me that it's probably not going to win at the Oscars. But Everything Everywhere All at Once, to its credit, also won at BAFTA. So is BAFTA good at predicting the Oscars? Not really either. In the last 10 years, they've only gotten it right 5 times. So half the time they get it right. So Critics' Choice never overlaps with the Oscars pretty much, at least in the past 10 years. And BAFTAs get it right about 50% of the time. So who's to say that these wins here are so indicative of what's going to win at the Oscars? I don't necessarily think that's entirely true. I also think that on a personal level, based on what we've seen in the past 10 years, we very rarely see Best Picture winners have massive sweeps, win 5, 6 Oscars. That used to happen in the 80s and the 90s. It doesn't happen anymore. The most Best Picture winner wins is like 4, or sometimes, most times it's 3, right? Moonlight will win Supporting Actor, Screenplay, Picture. Spotlight will win Screenplay, Picture. Green Book, Supporting Actor, Screenplay, Picture. That's a traditional path. Everything Everywhere All at Once, probably going to win Best Picture. Probably going to win Best Director. Probably going to win Supporting Actor. That's 3 right there. Then you add in screenplay. Then you want to add in editing. Then you want to add in Michelle Yeoh or Jamie Lee Curtis. And then it's to the point where they're not going to win all those Oscars. I know the movie's really well liked, but I'd be very shocked if it just totally dominates in that sense. The Oscars don't like to do that. They like to spread across the love. So maybe Banshees wins in screenplay. Maybe Cate Blanchett wins in Best Lead Actress. But I think in this scenario, I think Top Gun Maverick wins for Best Editing, because I think those precursors aren't a huge sign for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it's already got 3 Oscars in the bag. Does it really need all that more? Hard to say right now. I don't think it will. So it's sort of a weak frontrunner in my opinion. Then you look at Top Gun Maverick. Is it a strong number 2? Definitely a strong number 2. Why? Because it has a connection with the best sound stat. Now, I've mentioned this on multiple videos now. I want to mention it quickly again because I think it's an important fact. And this is, for the past 15 years, the winner of the Best Editing Award also had a Best Sound nomination. And as a matter of fact, for the past 9 years in a row, the winner of the Best Editing Award won a Best Sound award. So this is relevant because Everything Everywhere All at Once was not nominated for sound. Top Gun Maverick was. So listen, these stats can be broken. They happen all the time, every year. The question is whether or not you think you're going to go against it. So you can maybe break this stat, but don't break another stat. You have to be sort of careful in terms of how many of them are stats, because ultimately we rely on these things, historical precedents, stats, to tell us how Oscar voters traditionally like to vote. And this tells us that Oscar voters see a correlation between the Best Editing Award and the Best Sound Award. So for the past 9 years in a row, the editing winner also won a Sound Award. Who was the frontrunner to win for Best Sound? Top Gun Maverick. So there's a strong connection that'll also win in editing as well. And then also for the past 15 years in a row, the winner of Best Editing also at least had a sound nomination. Everything Everywhere All at Once didn't even have a sound nomination. I thought that was really telling. And I think that Top Gun Maverick will do better than it did at the BAFTAs, a little bit more American. It will surprise. I think it will win sound, and I think it can overperform and win for Best Editing too. And finally, the third category in which I think there will be surprise at the Oscars is going to be Best Documentary Short for Stranger at the Gate. Now, this is a little bit of a deep dive. Not a lot of people talk about the documentary short category. That's why you come to this channel, to get excellent Oscar analysis and to get someone like myself who actually does do the work, who watches all the movies and watches these shorts. You know, let's not forget, I was the guy who predicted Stranger at the Gate would get nominated in the first place when it had 100-to-1 odds on Gold Derby. No one else was predicting it. I thought it would get in. Of course it did, because I think it has a lot going for it. After seeing all the doc short movies, and then also I've been doing this now for 7 seasons. I've been watching all of those. I have started to develop a little bit of a little key understanding of the types of movies that usually win. And I think this one sort of checks a lot of the boxes. First of all, if you look at the past 5 years, 3 of the last 5 winners went to a short that was distributed by a news outlet. So a New York Times documentary or a Guardian documentary. Stranger at the Gate was distributed by the New Yorker. So it fits in that similar mold. So we have historical sort of precedent there. And why is this? Well, because it's easy to watch. It's available on YouTube. Everyone can watch it. And because anyone can vote on this category, that creates high visibility. So if you have to track down and put a lot of effort to watch a documentary short, that's going to be difficult. But if you can just search it into Google and it's the first pop there on YouTube, and you can watch it and it's good, and you can sort of just understand it easily, and it has an emotional connection, you'll most likely vote for it. So easy to watch really helps. Number 2, Malala Yousafzai, the world-renowned activist and sort of political figure. She's an executive producer on the film, and she's actually been campaigning in Hollywood in certain events, promoting this film, because she's an executive producer, talking about its political relevance and how much she appreciates that. And for a lot of these doc categories, oftentimes celebrities like Riz Ahmed or Kobe Bryant, they really help in terms of getting this movie seen, and having a star in that lead role really helps people in terms of ultimately voting for them, because hey, I know that person, I'm going to watch that first. Oh, if Malala is talking greatly about it, okay, I'll check it out. New Yorker, easy to watch. So celebrity sort of back, it being easy to watch with being paired by the New Yorker. And the third thing is it's very topical. Oftentimes in the documentary categories, the voters like to be very political and very topical. We'll see movies like American Factory or Icarus or even Citizen4, these very topical movies on whatever's happening in the news. They will be more relevant to voters and then ultimately win. And I think Stranger at the Gate is topical because it's about, in this politically divided time, particularly within the States, it's just about people coming together and changing extremist minds and sitting down and having a conversation and the benefit of that. And I think a lot of people want to believe that that's true and have that belief and sort of have that desire to just being like, oh, why can't we just sit down and sort of work this out together? This is that sort of dream version of that and the power of those conversations. That's what the movie's sort of all about. I think it's going to really touch people, particularly within Hollywood. I think it'll be enough to ultimately push it over the edge for Best Documentary Short. But those are my thoughts on 3 surprises I think is going to win at the Oscars. Stay tuned to this Thursday where I'm going to give my final Oscar predictions in all 23 categories. Lock them in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that video, but in the meantime, subscribe so you don't miss a video. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.